There is a single server rack sitting inside an unmarked facility in Hangzhou that just rendered $100 billion of Silicon Valley investment completely obsolete. For nearly 3 years, the world was told a very specific story. We were told that to build the future of artificial intelligence, you needed 3 things: endless billions of dollars, massive mega-warehouses of power-hungry chips, and the explicit permission of a few corporate titans in San Francisco. Every major tech company in the West bought into this exact rulebook. They spent billions buying up every single high-end processor on the planet, building data centers so large they required their own nuclear power arrangements. The strategy was simple: whoever spends the most money wins, and nobody else can even compete. Except, someone just did, without access to top-tier microchips, without thousands of high-powered processing units. And on a total budget that wouldn't cover the electricity bill of an American tech giant. A quiet, unknown engineering team did the unthinkable. They released an artificial intelligence system that matched the world's most powerful frontier models, while costing less than 3% of what Silicon Valley spent to build theirs. It was a result so absurd, so statistically improbable, that when the benchmarks first surfaced online, top researchers in California openly claimed the data was fabricated. They said it was impossible. They said no one could bypass the hardware laws of computer science, and that is where they made their fatal mistake. Because what the Western tech establishment didn't realize was that while they were busy spending billions on hardware, this quiet startup was engineering a mathematical shortcut. One that would change the global power balance of technology forever. To understand how they pulled off this impossible hack, we first have to go back to the exact moment the door was slammed shut and a silent crisis began. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the hidden wars shaping our global future, consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps us uncover the stories nobody else is telling. It started with a series of sweeping government trade restrictions, designed with one clear objective: total technological blockade. Washington imposed strict export controls, cutting off Chinese firms from acquiring the ultra-advanced silicon chips required to train next-generation artificial intelligence. The calculation was absolute: if you cut off the supply of elite hardware, you freeze the rival's capability in place, ensuring a permanent American monopoly over digital intelligence. On paper, the strategy worked instantly. Orders for cutting-edge processors were canceled at the border. Foreign cloud computing contracts were severed overnight. Server rooms across Eastern Asia were left with limited, aging, lower-tier hardware to the rest of the world. The race was over. Silicon Valley declared victory, assuming their competitors were locked behind an insurmountable hardware wall for at least a decade. But here's what almost nobody realized. When you strip a brilliant team of engineers of their resources, you don't stop them from thinking, you force them to change the game entirely. Inside the startup's headquarters, the leadership made an unexpected, almost desperate decision. They realized that competing in a brute force hardware war was guaranteed suicide. If you cannot buy more computing power, you cannot simply copy the Western playbook. You have to reject the playbook completely. The engineering team looked at the fundamental architecture of modern artificial intelligence and noticed a massive, dirty secret that Silicon Valley had ignored for years. Western models were wildly, shockingly inefficient. Because San Francisco had unlimited capital, their engineers never bothered to optimize how neural networks held memory, how chips communicated with each other, or how mathematical equations were processed. They just threw more chips at the problem. They solved engineering flaws with pure money. The Chinese startup realized this was their only opening. They didn't need faster hardware. If they could invent a software architecture that ran 10 times more efficiently on broken, legacy hardware, they completely stopped training standard models and began a long, dangerous preparation in total isolation for months. While the global media declared that China was falling years behind in the AI race, this small team locked themselves away, rewriting the fundamental mathematics of deep learning from scratch. They started with the most stubborn bottleneck in computer science: hardware memory limits. Normally, when a complex artificial intelligence model thinks, it loads massive amounts of data back and forth between processor chips, creating a digital traffic jam that consumes insane amounts of electricity and time. The startup's engineers redesigned the memory routing, creating an ultra-compressed attention mechanism that reduced data transfers by over 90% without losing accuracy. It was the equivalent of fitting an entire library into a single pocket notebook without removing a single word, but that wasn't even their biggest breakthrough. Next, they targeted the way neural networks process logic. Standard frontier models use every single parameter, every digital neuron, to answer every single query. It didn't matter if you asked the system a simple math problem or a complex medical question. The entire massive machine had to fire all at once, burning immense computational energy. The startup threw that design in the trash. They pioneered a hyper-fragmented mixture of expert system, where the model was broken down into dozens of smaller, specialized subbrains. When a question was asked, a dynamic digital router would instantly awaken only the exact tiny percentage of the brain needed for that specific task, leaving the rest of the system completely asleep. The result was staggering. They were suddenly generating frontier-level answers while consuming a fraction of the computational power, allowing them to chain together hundreds of old, restricted chips and make them perform like a modern American supercomputer. They had taken scrap hardware and hacked it to run like the most advanced computing engine on Earth. And yet, they told no one for nearly 2 years. They ran silent stress tests, quietly refining their algorithms in the dark, waiting for the exact moment to strike. Remember the billions of dollars Silicon Valley spent securing chip supply chains. This was the moment that investment began to crumble, because on a random weekday, without a single press conference, without a marketing budget, the startup uploaded their full, completed model to an open-source research platform. They didn't just release the access point, they released the actual code weights, the underlying math, the blueprint. When researchers around the globe downloaded the software and ran it through independent tests, a shockwave hit the technology industry. The model was scoring on par with, and in some areas beating, systems that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to train. The startup had built a system capable of rivaling OpenAI's best work. For roughly $6 million, the tech world went into an absolute tailspin in a matter of hours. The myth of the hardware wall was shattered forever. Wall Street analysts scrambled to adjust their projections. Tech executives in California called emergency meetings. The realization was immediate and terrifying: if a frontier model can be built for $6 million on legacy chips, then the entire economic valuation of the American tech ecosystem is built on a massive lie. But the true crisis wasn't economic, it was geopolitical. By releasing their compressed software to the public for free, the startup triggered a global shift that trade regulators never saw coming. Small businesses, foreign governments, and independent developers across South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, who were previously priced out of Western technology, suddenly downloaded this free, hyper-efficient Chinese model. Overnight, thousands of enterprise products, sovereign infrastructure projects, and regional tech platforms began building their entire digital futures on top of code developed in Hangzhou. The sanctions, designed to isolate Chinese technology, had unintentionally forced the creation of a system so cheap, so accessible, that it began capturing the global market by default. Why pay high subscription fees and cloud taxes to a foreign giant in San Francisco when you can host your own sovereign intelligence on local, cheap servers? Using code that costs nothing, the Trojan horse had cleared the gates, and nobody knew how to stop it. And that brings us to the real threat facing the global economy today. We are no longer just looking at a story about clever software optimization. We are watching the complete breakdown of Western technological dominance if software efficiency continues to outpace hardware development. export controls become completely useless. It means any nation, any startup, any non-aligned entity can bypass international embargoes using mathematical agility instead of physical supply chains. The moat is gone. Silicon Valley now finds itself caught in an impossible dilemma. If they keep spending hundreds of billions on massive hardware arrays, their products will be too expensive to compete with the free, lightweight alternatives spreading across the rest of the world. But if they stop spending, they risk losing their technological lead entirely. Meanwhile, inside that unmarked building in Beijing, the engineers aren't celebrating. They are already working on their next-generation system, using synthetic data loops and self-improving code architectures designed to run on even lower power requirements. They have proven that intelligence isn't limited by how many chips you can buy, but by how smartly you can write the code. The long-held monopoly on artificial intelligence has been broken. Not with a massive army of supercomputers, but with a quiet math equation that nobody was looking for. The world thought the technology race would be decided by who had the most money, but it turns out it was decided by who had nothing left to lose. Which brings us to the one question that every government and corporation must now answer when high-level intelligence becomes free, open, and impossible to restrict. Who actually controls the future of human thought? If this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the invisible dynamics shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and share this video, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.